Hey everybody, Roy Silverstein here. I'm the owner and chief engineer at Rarefied Recording in San Diego, California. Welcome to version 2 of the full studio tour or the control room studio tour, depending on which one you're watching here. Thanks so much for everyone who watched the version 1 video. I had over 50,000 views and 400 subscribers now and about 200 comments, so it's very appreciated and very humbling. I'm mainly doing this version 2 because I got a new recording console, this Neve Genesys, which we're going to get into soon. But yeah, the rest of the video is going to be the same stuff as before, but I just wanted to update you guys on the control room stuff. So yeah, let's get started. Alright, so Rarefied was designed by the great studio designer Wes Lashow. He's designed studios all over the world. And he's an amazing acoustician. This control room here that I'm standing in features a very extensive diffusion system by RPG Acoustics. And just the nature of all the angles and the treatment in this room, what you get in the sweet spot is called a reflection-free zone. So when you're listening to the speakers, you hear basically just the sound of the speakers with very minimal influence from the room itself. So that gives you a very accurate picture of what your mics are capturing and how your mix is coming together. So the main monitoring system in the studio are these Dynaudio M3As. They're soffit mounted and they're powered by Bryson amps and Bryson crossover. These are amazing speakers. They go down to 30 hertz. They go all the way up, to 20 kilohertz. And they're truly meant to be the main listening monitor in the studio. They're not just for show. So you get a very, very accurate picture of the full audio spectrum when you use these. So there's a secondary and third option for speakers of the studio that come up and down on these nifty motorized stands. We've got the Aventone mix cubes and the Neumann KH310 speakers. So the Neumanns are great. I mean, Neumann actually bought a company called Klein & Hummel. So these are very similar to the Klein & Hummel speakers that you may have heard of before. It's a three-way speaker, so woofer, mid-range driver, and a tweeter. Nice and flat, but definitely give you something a little different than the Dynes. The Aventones are there more for auditioning how things are translating to a more modest set of speakers. Alright, let's talk about the elephant in the room here. This is the new console at Rarefied. This is a 32 channel AMS Neve Genesys. It's a modern Neve with the legacy of sound of Neve, but a lot of new bells and whistles that you would expect in modern production. So, first of all, I want to mention the beautiful custom desk that this console is housed in, which was built by Tony Brett of Brett Acoustics. He did a lot of the internal installation, acoustic treatment, and build out of the studio here, as well as most Wes Lashow studios. He's quite a genius of craftsman, real craftsman. So I love the center section here that we did for it. Let's face it, there's a lot of Pro Tools use going on in today's production, so having a dedicated space for computing is really great to have. I love this wrist rest bumper area. Just a great look and a great feel. But the desk itself is totally analog, but it's under digital control. So for instance, all the switches on here actually talk to a microprocessor, which then does the change in the circuit instead of being directly in the circuit. So that opens up things like having total recall on the board, because you can save all the states of the switches and then bring them right back. And a lot of the knobs are actually rotary encoders, so they also have instant recall. And other ones are analog, but they have a computer-aided system to get you recall for them. So that's great. It's got flying faders. So there's a way to do analog fader automation with the Encore automation from Neve. And it also has a mode where it becomes a control surface and can control Pro Tools or another DAW. So that's pretty cool. There's 32 channels of 1073 style mic pre on here, complete with the Neve transformer, so it has that beautiful Neve sound. Now this half of the console has 1084 3-band style EQ, and the other half has a 4-band 88RS style EQ. So kind of cool to have both options there, the 3-band, 4-band. What's neat about the EQ is that there aren't dedicated knobs on each channel for the EQ. You actually control it from these 4 rotary encoders. So if you select a channel here, you get a visual of the EQ, and then you can change the frequency and boost and cut with these encoders. That means that you have total recall again of the EQ, instant recall, as well as cool features like you can copy and paste EQ settings, you can link channels so that changing one changes the other. And something I didn't really think about until I had the desk was when you're changing the EQ, you're sitting here in the sweet spot. It doesn't matter if you're EQing channel 1 or channel 32, you're in the exact spot you want to be. Whereas before, if you remember from version 1, if you watched it of the whole video here, I had a Toft ATB 32, which was a good console, but you know, this is a huge upgrade. But you know, I used to have the EQ on that board, and you'd be way over there, you'd be way over there. You'd be having to come back to the sweet spot to make sure that your EQ made sense. So in this case, you're hearing it exactly as it is, no matter what channel you're EQing. So yeah, besides that, we've got 4 mono aux sends, 2 stereo aux sends. We have 4 dedicated effects returns, stereo effects returns with a width feature, which is kind of neat. There's also 8 subgroups here, and a very complete master section with all kinds of options. It's pretty impressive what they've done. So yeah, all in all, this is an amazing board. I'm very happy with it, and it really is kind of the best of both worlds, the old Neve sound, but all this modern feature set. All right, so let's get into the rack gear. We've got some new stuff back here now. So we got these nice side table racks that Tony Brett also made for me. Nice matching wood and everything. And back here in this corner, I put some basic mic pre's, some stuff that was easy to use when you're way out of the sweet spot. So this is the Ampex 350 mic pre that's came out of an Ampex tape machine, but it's basically been converted to just be a mic pre. This is super hi-fi, like tube stuff. You think it might sound old or something like that, but it sounds very, very open, super high headroom, and just a great mic pre to use on anything. The other Ampex down there, the Ampex 600, is a totally different beast though. So also came out of an Ampex tape machine. But this one is very, very colored and gets distorted pretty fast. So interesting that these are so different. Now this one here is totally different. This is the John Hardy 4-channel M1 mic pre. So this is a very, very clean mic pre, super linear, and something that classical guys wouldn't hesitate to use. So yeah, you know, we got clean, we got colored, we got stuff in between here. So now I'm over at the credenza here, Bay 1. Up top we've got a Smart C1 bus compressor. Well, you can use it for anything really. This is an SSL style compressor, like the G series compressor. So it is great on your stereo mix bus if you want to get that glue, that tightened bottom end, and that finished record kind of sound. This here is 500 series chassis from API. It's stuffed with a bunch of different things. So first up we have the envelope from Elysia. So this is a transient designer, similar to the SPL transient designer if you're familiar with that. But a little more sophisticated, because besides the attack and sustain, which lets you boost or cut the attack or sustain of an instrument, you've got these frequency selections, which kind of dials in where in the frequency spectrum you're focusing those attacks and sustain cuts or boosts. You can take that frequency option off and just have it full range if you want, or you can also operate this as just a simple equalizer, actually, as a bonus. Really cool. I love this on like kick drum and stuff like that. It's kind of magical what it can do. These spec EQs look kind of like SSL style, but they're really just very clean EQs that I got for that case where, you like the tone you're getting, but you just need to address a certain problem or something like that. You don't want to change like the overall tone. These are great for something like that because you can do like tight cues on it and stuff like that. Here we have a pair of Helios Type 69 mic pre EQs. So Helios was a console manufacturer, famously used at Olympic Studios in England. This would have been an EQ and mic pre that you would have heard probably on like Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon and stuff like that. Very interesting texture and color to these guys. This is new to the studio. If you saw version 1, you didn't see this. This is a API 560 graphic equalizer. So these are super cool for things like kick drum. It's just nice to have a graphic equalizer in the studio. It really lets you, dial something in since you have all these different frequencies that you can change at the same time. And it just has that wonderful API punchy sound. Now here, these are new too, from version 1 of this tour. These are Moog ladder filters. So Moog's actually discontinuing these 500 series processors that they've created. So I figured I'm going to pick up a pair of these ladders because I always wanted to try them out. So it's kind of the classic Moog high pass and low pass resonant filters, which can be used for tone shaping and for some kind of fun creative effects because it can do those kind of bleepy bloopy kind of sounds. So pretty neat. Here we have a Moog 500 series analog delay. I love this delay not only for the sound but also for this MIDI port. There's actually a plugin that you can open in your DAW, and you can control most of the knobs here and switches from the plugin, as well as things that aren't even on the knobs at all, like the LFO. And you can sync stuff to your Pro Tools session. You can obviously automate a lot of stuff, so you can get really creative with this. It's really cool. All right, this I'm excited about. This is a new compressor to the studio. This is a BG2 from Bryce Gonzalez, a fellow from Los Angeles. So I was doing a lot of research on compressors like the old Altec tube compressors and the stay levels and the Federal compressors and old RCA compressors and things like that. And I stumbled upon the BG2, which is kind of a combination of all those things. So in this British mode here, it sort of sounds like the Altec compressors that Abbey Road or EMI Studios would modify. They called them the RS-124. So it kind of does that thing. And in the American mode, you have more of the stay level or the RCA Bk 6A style sound. So there's quite a few tones out of this thing, and this 600 or 150 ohm input impedance makes a huge difference too. The 150 American sounds so beefy, it's crazy. And what else is cool about this is you can turn the compression off and then just use it as like a line driver. So basically picking up the tonality of the circuit and maybe driving it into distortion and stuff like that. So I'm really excited about using this more here at the studio. Got a little bit of space here for stuff in the future, but down here we've got a Mercury M-72. This is basically a copy of a Telefunken V72, which was a classic mic preamp that would have been used in a certain period at Abbey Road, EMI Studios. So really great, creamy kind of mid-range, and also a great mic pre for bass, actually. Okay, moving on to Bay 2 here. Up top, we've got a Skibby Electronics 59C red stripe compressor. So this is basically an LA2A copy Bill Skibby has a really cool studio in Michigan called Key Club, and I was turned on to him from some friends. So he does some other great pieces of gear, like some Flickinger mic pre's and stuff like that. But yeah, this thing sounds great. I don't have an LA2A, but it does exactly what I would expect it to on a vocal, on a bass, etc. Here we have a Universal Audio 6176. So this is a 610 tube mic pre with EQ, followed by an 1176 compressor. You can link them together in the join mode, or you can hit split and use them separately. So pretty cool to have both of those. Down here we have a Dynamite stereo compressor, expander, limiter, gate. Does a lot. The Dynamite has a real interesting, aggressive kind of sound. It can really put a hard edge on your kick drum or something like that. And I do like using the expander, and for like toms. If you don't want your tom mics to constantly be influencing your drum sound, you can use that to kind of lower the mic signal until someone hits the tom. So pretty cool to have that. And this is a piece by a company called Overstayer, another Los Angeles-based boutique manufacturer making some really cool stuff. This is the one they call the Saturator. So this is basically a distortion box. But it gives you a lot of flexibility in terms of how you want your distortion to sound. It's got this amazing resonant high-pass filter on it, which you can totally put into oscillation if you want. And then just a lot of stages to drive things into saturation in different ways. And a high cut to kind of cut off some of the very highs. And a blend knob, so you can dial in exactly how much of the distortion you want mixed with the dry signal. So really cool piece. These two pieces here are from Orban. You got a stereo compressor and a stereo equalizer. Orban would have been something you would have seen more in like the 70s in a broadcast situation probably, but they fit right here at home in the studio too. Very colorful, not for everything, but I've gotten some cool tones out of these. So we got those. And this is new to the studio from the last video. This is an Altec mic pre, the 1589B. This is actually a 2-in, 1-out mic pre, but so it has a little mixer inside, but I'm just using one channel of it. So it's just a regular mic pre. Solid state, pretty grimy right away. It doesn't really have a clean tone, I don't think. So they're probably cool for a distorted vocal or like a saturated snare drum or something like that. Down here we have a Yamaha E1010 analog delay. So this was probably designed more for a guitar rig, to be honest, but it's a cool studio piece as well. It's got an EQ on it. It's got the delay times with this push button and with the delay knob here. You got your feedback and your mix knob, and actually this very, very interesting frequency modulation section that can get pretty crazy. Here we are at Bay 3 here of the credenza. Besides our trusty Furman voltage regulator that's providing clean power to everything, we've got our DBX 160X up top. So, pretty classic compressor, great on vocals or bass, pretty flexible. It's got that nice over easy compression that DBX does. Followed down from there is the Pultec reissues. Got a pair of those. These are the EQM 1S3 mastering version. So they're all stepped attenuators, which is nice for recall and so forth. So yeah, these are the reissues of the Pultec. The guy named Steve Jackson acquired the Pultec name after befriending the original owner and proving that he could do a true recreation of the Pultec. Steve Jackson's a material scientist. So if he could not source an original component, he actually did a study of the original component and recreated it. So for all intents and purposes, this is exactly what you would have gotten back in the day if you had bought a Pultec, and they sound amazing. It's a type of equalizer that you can use on your entire mix, but I don't hesitate to use these on anything really. Kick drums, vocals, guitars. They just sound so sweet and so musical, and you can't really get a bad sound out of them. So those are amazing to have. Down here we've got 4-channel API mic pre, the 3124 Plus. So, you know, we got a lot of great mic pre's in the studio. Obviously now 32 channels worth of Neve, but some people really like API sound, and because they're awesome. And great on drums. So, you know, if you're doing drums here, you can do, you know, kick, snare, and overheads or something like that. But also sounds great on lots of other things, vocals and so forth. Has that, you know, classic American punchy, aggressive sound that API is known for. This here is a Dimitar real reverb. So it's a spring reverb, actually, 2 channels. First channel has a short decay, second channel has a long decay. You can still use them together as a stereo thing too. It works pretty well. Yeah, very smooth, very nice sounding spring. Down here we've got the original DBX 160, so not the 160X, but just the 160 with the VU meter. So a classic. This was bought through Vintage King, so it was reissued. It was gone through and brought back up to original specs. So great on, you know, a little tap on their kick, a little tap on your snare, a little bass, you know, something like that. Here is Universal Audio's reissue of their famous LA3A. So very similar to the LA2A, but solid state instead of tube. But, you know, you would use it on probably similar sources. So great compressor, opto. Here we have a Chandler Limited Germanium mic preamp. So what's interesting about this mic pre is it's got a variable feedback control. So feedback is a technique used in a lot of circuit designs to stabilize the amplifiers and kind of control the total harmonic distortion. But it's unusual to have a way to adjust that. So you can get some different tones out of this thing with this. It's also got this thick knob, which really does thicken things up. So it's a great mic pre for something like electric guitar lead. I just love the way the germanium transistors kind of create this very creamy mid-range. So love that. Down here at the bottom is another spring reverb. This is from a company called Mic Mix. It's called the Master Room, and I love this one. It's got an EQ on both channels that you can control separately, and the blend knob and mono chamber drive option if you're doing mono into it, as well as mono chamber return. Just another very smooth, almost plate-like spring reverb. All right, moving on to bay number 4 here. Up top, we've got a Neve 33609 stereo compressor limiter, a classic compressor. It just has that wonderful Neve sound. I love this on drum bus and sometimes on the entire mix. Just adds that special thing that Neve does. Below it is another stereo compressor, another classic. This is called the Compex, and this is a reissue. So this one's pretty, complicated. There's a lot of ins and outs. It has an expander gate and a limiter on it and stuff like that. But this is a great one for drums and guitars and stuff like that. It's famous for being part of the sound of like When the Levee Breaks, the famous Led Zeppelin song. So a really cool compressor. This, of course, here is the ubiquitous Distressor from Empirical Labs, a modern studio staple. Can't really say a bad thing about it. It's probably the most versatile compressor ever designed. You can go from super subtle, just tiny little bits of compression to smashing things. Really should get another one of these, I think. Here we have Purple Audio, the MC77. This is their 1176 copy of a particular variant. This is quite aggressive sounding, great for a rock vocal, a snare drum, something like that. It can do all in, which is super cool. So that's nice to have. Down here, this is new to the studio since the last video we did. This is a Furman RV1 spring reverb. So yes, Furman didn't just make power conditioners, they made some audio stuff too. So totally different spring than the other springs. This one's much more boingy, much more slappy, and great for like reggae dub stuff or what have you. Now here, this is a radial workhorse power strip. So this houses 3 500 series units, and I happen to outfit it with 3 different radials. We've got the phase cue first. This is a phase shifting device. I like to use it on like, for instance, when you're recording bass and you've got the DI and you've got the mic, and there's a phase difference there because the DI is recorded, like at the speed of light basically, and the mic is recorded at the speed of sound. So there's a little shift there. So you could put the phase cue on the DI, and then by ear you can kind of blend it in with the mic, and maybe inside and outside kick drum, similar kind of thing. You can obviously do these things in Pro Tools with your eyes, but I actually kind of dig the way that you can just use your ear and change this knob, and there's actually some in between things that you might not have considered that sound better, because you have basically like an equalizer when you start blending 2 signals together like that, especially when they came from slightly different components, 2 different mics, or a DI versus a mic. They're going to sound different. They're going to have different frequency components. So the way that they blend together is quite interesting when you start messing with this. Besides that, we've got 2 of these Ecstasies, EXTC from Radial. These are designed to interface the pro audio world with the guitar stompbox world. So let's say you were mixing and you wanted to put a flanger or a phaser on a guitar. Obviously you could reach for a plugin, but if you had a cool pedal that you wanted to use instead, this would be an easy way to use that. It also can act as a reamp device, which I've done many times. So it's nice. It's got a blend knob on it too, so you can get creative with that. This here is an Alesis Midi Verb 2. Another engineer bought this on the cheap and was like, "Hey, let's throw it in the studio." So we did. It's all right. It's cheap. It's a cheap digital reverb, but I've used it a bit, and it's got some cool sounds in it. This here is a new headphone system. This is the head unit for the Behringer PowerPlay 16. So we used to have the Hearback system, but upgraded to the 16-channel system, and it's got a much more complete feature set as far as the remote mixer goes. You can EQ things, you can pan things, you can do a lot more than you could do on the Hearback. So that's cool, and this is just a way to route those signals to different headphone ports in the studio. Okay, we're over here in Bay 5. Now this is where we have the patch bays now. If you watched the original version of the video, we had the patch bays in the desk next to the Toft. But now with the Genesys and the center section that we did, there just wasn't room for having the patch bays there. So I did a big rewiring of the studio. It took a week and a half of hard work, and we brought the patch bays over here. Actually had to add 2 more patch bays because there's just more ins and outs and everything. So yeah, it's great to have the a really professionally designed tiny telephone patch bay system. It lets you connect any piece of gear to any other piece of gear, and there's basically unlimited possibilities of how you can route things in the studio with these. Here we have some more 500 series stuff. This is a purple Sweet 10 chassis with some room to grow here, as you can see. But right now we've got a pair of Animod AM660s installed in the first 2 slots. The Animod is a pretty unique thing. So what they've done here is just like how plug-in manufacturers model a piece of vintage gear and model the behavior and then put it in a digital kind of version of that. Animod took a similar approach. They did a modeling of the classic Fairchild compressor, the 660s, and instead of using the big tubes and transformers that would have been required, and all the expense and all the heat and all the space needed for those things, they used some different analog components that basically had the same behavior as those circuits. So a very interesting and unique way of approaching a circuit design. So yeah, these are really cool, you know, for vocal, for bass, for guitars, a very vibey kind of sound. Next to it is a Esser from Empirical Labs, the same company that does the Distressor. So this is their de-esser. And obviously you can do de-essing, you know, in the box. But sometimes it's nice to just get it right at the beginning. If you're having an S problem and you don't want to mess around, you can just dial this thing in. So a really great de-esser. Down here, a little more 500 series to go through here. So we've got the Shadow Hills Mono Gamma. What's cool about this is it has two different transformer options in it. You've got steel or nickel, and then you can also do discrete, which is no transformer. So three pretty distinct sounds. The nickel's like super beefy, the nickel's much brighter. I'm sorry, the steel is much brighter. A really cool mic pre. Next to the Mono Gamma are the standard audio level ores. Now these go after the sound of the Shure Level Lock, which was this crazy compressor that tried to make like everything the same level, no matter what was coming in. So they really pump, they really go crazy, but it's pretty neat to put on like something like drums. And then there's this crunch mode that they have in it, and the crunch mode is just more like a distortion, and I love that too. Next to the level ores are the Electrodyne 501 mic pre's. Got a pair of those. Electrodyne was another, you know, classic console manufacturer from back in the day. People like the Beach Boys would have used them. Another very full, nice sounding mic pre, good complement to the Neve sound, the API sound, etc. Somewhere in between, you know. And then there's this TG2 mic pre from Chandler Limited. So this is a mic pre that has the same circuit that would have been in some of the desks at Abbey Road. So that Beatles kind of thing. And yeah, this thing's amazing. It just has this incredible way that you can push it just to the edge of sounding terrible and just bring it back and just a little bit. And an electric guitar, for instance, will just sound so incredible. So yeah, that's all the gear here. One other digital reverb we have at the studio is this funky Roland R880. This is the little remote box for it. So it looks very 80s because it is. But yeah, this came out around the same time as like the famous Lexicon 480L and stuff like that. So it was kind of their answer to it. But it's a great reverb. It really doesn't sound very digital to me. I've used it on stuff and it just sounded very warm and very nice. It's a funny thing about the early digital reverbs is because some of the early digital converters sounded kind of terrible, but the reverb sounded good. So just a weird, funny thing. But yeah, we got one of those too. Okay, back over here now we have another side table rack, custom made by Tony Brad again. And here I've put the converters. Again, we had to make space, having to move the patch bays into the credenza. The converters needed to go somewhere else. So this was an obvious place to put them. So up top we've got this Burl 2-channel converter, which is kind of just in complement to the Apogees, which are the main set of converters for the studio. But the Burl is like a kind of different flavor. And you can use it in Pro Tools for tracking purposes, or what I do with it mainly is I capture my mix through it. And it's just built differently than the Apogees. It's built more like you might see an old tape machine built with, you know, transformers and stuff like that. So a bit of a bigger bottom end, a little more rolled off on the top, but just a wonderful sound, quite tape-like. Okay, and then we got the Apogees here. So the Apogee is, a pretty classic brand now of conversion. These are the 8016X and the DA16X. We got 32 in and out at the studio, which should be more than you ever need. And the 8016X has the soft limit feature, which is another tape-like thing where as you push the converter harder, it starts to roll off and compress naturally. So that's a nice thing. At the bottom here, we've got actually a Xlr Patch Bay. This is a place where a visiting engineer can connect up their own gear. This got 8 in and 8 out. So these are on combo jacks. So whether it's quarter inch or TRS, whether it's XLR or TRS, it doesn't matter. Just an easy way. These will show up now at the tiny telephone patch bay if you plug into them. All right, I'm standing in one of the corners of the control room now where we have a big rack of synths here. Got a variety of things. So up top is this Studio Electronics ATC1. This is actually a totally analog synthesizer. What's cool about it is these little cartridges that have different classic filter types in them from the Mini Moog and ARP2600 and others. Pretty cool synth. I actually usually have another Studio Electronics one that goes here. It's called the Omega 2. It's out for repair right now, but that's usually there. And then we've got two analog modeling synths. So these are digital synths that do a pretty good job of kind of recreating a similar analog sound. We got the Virus and the MS2000. And then there's two digital synths here, the Korg Wave Station and the Roland JV2080. So if you need just like a regular piano sound or something, or organ sound, you can just quickly grab some of that, or there's lots of strange sounds in those. This is the MIDI interface itself. So you can actually, plug in a MIDI keyboard here and route it to any of these keyboards, or you can run a MIDI sequence from Pro Tools to any of these units. And just one last thing to mention over here is our ISO box for the computer. So this is a great little way to keep the noise from the computer down in the control room and keep the computer cool. And works like a charm. All right, I'm in the other corner of the control room now here where we have an actual real tape machine. This is an MCI JH16. It looks like a 24 track, but this is actually a 16 track. So I put a 16 track head stack on here. So pretty cool, 2-inch 16 track. You get really wide track width for each track. This was bought through Chris Mara of Mara Machines. That's why it says Mara here. He refurbishes old tape machines. He's based out of Nashville. So yeah, really cool machine, the JH16. It came before the JH24. Once they got to the JH24, they pulled out like all the transformers. So this one still has all those transformers, all that color and vibe. We've got the remote for it here. Still works. Rewind function there. Stop. And even the auto locate feature. Pretty cool. And you also have a manual jog feature that's pretty neat here. Just as soon as you touch it, you can go backwards or forwards. So yeah, when you want tape, there's nothing like the real thing. And we got it here at Rarefied. Alright, I just want to go over some of the guitars over here that we got. Let's start with the Telecaster, Fender Telecaster, care of Scott Lehman, who's actually operating the camera right now. Classic American Tele. And another Scott Lehman guitar he's lent to the studio is this Gibson Firebird. Pretty cool. And these have all been set up not too long ago by Sean Hutchinson of Hutchinson's. This here is something new. If you had watched the old video as well as the Firebird, that's new too. But this is on loan from my uncle-in-law. This is a Gibson Les Paul. Before I had an Epiphone Les Paul, which I still have. But what's cool about this, besides being actual Gibson Les Paul, is that my uncle-in-law had Les Paul actually sign this part. So this is a real Les Paul signature up here. So that's pretty neat. Now we also have my first electric guitar. This is a Mexican Fender Strat. So it sounds good. You know, I think some of the old Mexican Strats actually were made to quite good specs. And I think this one falls into that category. Here we have a couple basses. We got this Fender P bass. It's got a vintage 70s neck, nice and thin, on a more modern body. Great bass. People love it. Sounds quite nice. Then we also have another bass. This is a Hofner copy from Jay Tercer, so Beatles bass, if you will. Put flat wounds on it, so it has a real nice kind of muted sound to it. And then another guitar here. This is a Dan Electro reissue of the Hornet guitar. Really vibey kind of sound on this, and very different. One last thing to mention while it's here, over here, got a tenor ukulele from Pono. This sounds really nice. All right, I'm over here on the other side of the control room now, where we've got a complement of interesting acoustic guitars and a banjo. This here was my grandmother's. This is a K. Really unique old sound to that guitar there. This one found at a thrift store. It's nearly fallen apart, but it actually sounds pretty neat. If you're looking for something different, this one will really give you something. This is probably the most normal sounding of the acoustics in the studio. It's an Alvarez. So if you're looking for something just more standard, I'd pick up this one. And we've got this classical guitar that belonged to my father. So nylon strings. You know, if you need that, we got that. And also my father's. This was his long neck banjo. So if you need a banjo, we got that too. So before we leave the control room, I just wanted to show you guys a couple of really nice DIs that we have at the studio. First off is the Ready tube direct box. This is a pretty simple device, just got a level knob on it, but yeah, it sounds really great. And there's another tube direct box from a company called Tonecraft. This is the 363. Actually a local San Diego company. This one's awesome because, well, it's got an input gain and an output gain, so you can drive it hard but then pull the level back if you need to. And in fact, you can pull this knob out and get even more gain. And then you also have got Baxendale EQ on here. Just simple treble and bass EQ, but some really nice frequencies selected for that. It also actually has two independent outputs. Which is cool because I like to record bass, just like the direct bass and then like a compressed version. So that gives you an easy way to like send one straight in and one through a compressor. It's got ground lifts on the back, and just a great sound that kind of goes after that Ampeg B15 sort of thing. But these work great not just on bass but on synths too, of course. With the Tonecraft, there's this BoostMate product that they also sell, which is basically lets you use this as a mic pre. So you plug a mic in here, and it boosts up the gain a little bit before it comes in here, and sets the impedance correctly and everything. So it sounds really great. I've used it on kick drum, used it on vocals. So just a cool thing to be able to do. All right, we are now in the live room at Rarefied Recording. This is a neutral sounding space, I'd say, very even throughout, not particularly lively, more on the dead side, but not overly dead. It's very even throughout, like I said, so it doesn't really matter where you set up your drums or other instruments, you're going to get a good sound. If you want to pull out some room tone, it's totally possible. you know, by placing mics in the right place and compressing them and so forth. And also we've got over 10-foot ceilings here with a nice cloud up the top, so there's no concerns about bad reflections from the ceiling or anything like that. So one fairly uncommon feature in the live room here are these bifuser panels, which are on 2 different walls. Basically, you're seeing right now the reflective side of these, and you can flip them around, and you get the absorptive side. So by doing this, you can really dial in how much high frequency energy especially is bouncing around the room and get like a really dead sound or something with a little more life to it. Now, one other uncommon feature that we have in the live room here is that we actually have a set of windows. So if you want sunlight in your session, just draw these drapes back and boom, you got it. If you prefer darkness, close them up. No problem. But either way, it's cool to have the option. So we actually have 2 of these really heavy-duty Gobos in the studio. These are great for isolating things in the live room that you might be doing at the same time. It's great that they have the glass on top, so you have great sight lines, but still awesome isolation. The 2 bottom panels on each side are actually slightly different. So this is the red side here, which is just purely absorptive. If you come around to the other side, which is colored brown, this actually has a harder backing on it, and it's a little bit more reflective. So you can use those as you deem fit. So besides the main live room, there's actually 2 of these sound locks. They're on either side of the studio. They're small, but they work fine for isolating guitar amps or even a vocalist. They're wired for the hearback system and up to 4 mics. They also have instrument and speaker level pass-throughs, which allow the performer to be out in the live room or the control room, but have their amp or speaker cab in the sound lock itself. So if you haven't already noticed, we have quite a few instruments in the live room here. This right here is our Boston Baby Grand piano, on loan from my friend Normandy. And it is designed by Steinway, actually. So it's not a Steinway, but it inherits some of the technical aspects and some of the craftsmanship of a Steinway. And because of that, it sounds amazing, and it records just super, super nice. All right, over here we've got our Hammond organ. This is a B2. It's got the Leslie speaker with it. And what's cool about this one is someone added a percussion upgrade. So this actually makes it more like a B3. And what you get here is, you know, the classic Hammond sound with the Leslie speaker, which is very difficult to emulate with anything else. So on top of the Hammond organ, we got a few fun toys here. This is a Casio SK1 sampling keyboard, classic. This is a Yamaha PSS 130, kind of a fun 8-bit sound to this guy. We've got a Micro-Moog synth right here. This is an amazing synthesizer. And what's fun is that we've got these little presets that go on top. That's how they used to do presets. So we got a bunch of those, so that's cool. It's also some fun toys like this little Korg Monotron and some different analog drum machines like this Con and K Rhythmer and this Rhythm Ace. So some cool little toys. Now on top of the Leslie here, we've got a whole pedal board. This is a nice pedal board from a local company called Salvage Custom. And we got an assortment here of different guitar pedals. The Ibanez Tube Screamer, the JHS Cran. Here's an old Big Muff Pi with the old green case there. A couple of Moog effects, the MF Flange and the MF Trem. Little electro-harmonic Small Stone, as well as the Analogizer and the Small Clone. This is a really great pedal, the Warp Vinyl from Chase Bliss Audio. Super cool sounds out of that. A Voodoo Labs Microvibe, a Memory Boy, and a little ABY switch. So over here we've got a Rhodes Mark I electric piano. Classic sound of the Rhodes. It's got those bell-like tones, but also if you dig into it, it really gets kind of crunchy and mean. So I love that. On top of the Rhodes, we've got some other fun toys. Some more pedals like this octave multiplexer and a wah pedal. Some of these Korg Volca series sequencers and so forth. I got a vocoder here. This is a funny little thing called the Remco sound effects that makes weird gunshot sounds and laser gun sounds. This is a cool little guy interface that lets you hook up your guitar to the Leslie speaker. So that can be fun, or anything really with a 1/4 inch connection. And then this is a really kind of rare synth now. It's called the Sid Station. It's made by Electron, and inside it actually has the sound chip from a Commodore 64. So it makes these crazy, old computer sounds. So over here we've got a Wurlitzer electric piano. It's similar to the Rhodes, but it's got its own thing going. I like having these actual electric pianos in the studio because they have their own little quirks to them. And yeah, you could have a Nord Lead 3 or something in Logic that you pull up with these sounds, but it's never going to be something unique like this. Now, over here, we've got a Farfisa mini compact organ. These are Italian organs, made probably in the 60s. And they've got these really dark, haunting, reedy sounds to them. Really cool. So over here we actually have a Deegan Vibraphone made in Chicago. Not every studio has a vibraphone, but it's kind of cool thing to have. It might not be for every project, but if you're looking for one, here it is. We got a whole box of mallets for it, as well as other stuff down here, like a whole set of percussion, an auto harp, a Hohner melodica, and a glockenspiel. One more instrument for you. We actually do have a theremin here at the studio. One of the earliest electronic musical instruments ever invented. Very, very difficult to play, but if you'd like to give it a shot, we got one. Alright, so now we're going to go over a bunch of different amplifiers we got at the studio. Starting with this silver-faced Fender Twin. Needs little introduction. Great amp. What can I say? On top of it here, we got this fun little Greta tube amp. Pretty much nothing but dirt out of this guy, but it can be fun for effect. Similar thing here, not tube, but this fun little orange Crush 3. This right here, this Ampeg Gemini 1, I love this amp. It's probably my favorite amp in the studio. Just has a really unique character and vibe to it, and I love the reverb sound and the tremolo on it. Over here we got a solid state Harvard Reverb. So if you need a different tone, you can really get something different with this one. Over here we've got a Fender Bandmaster with a black face. My favorite clean tone amp I've ever heard is this one. It's got the 212 cabinet for it, and this is a Schreier Audio reverb unit, locally made. This is another reverb unit here. It's a PV Valverb. It's tube. It's got a tremolo in it as well. Really cool. And this is a Trainer open back combo amp. Pretty underrated amp here. And finally, we've got a bass amp, classic, the Ampeg B15. Big transformers, tubes. Maybe not for loud rock, but for pretty much anything else, this is a great sounding bass amp. Okay, so one other cool thing I just wanted to show you guys before we leave the live room here are these two tape echoes I got. Got the classic Space Echo, just the standard RE101 here. It's old, it's a little funky, but if you're after that sound, there's nothing like it. Over here, though, is a much more modern tape echo. This only recently came out. It's the T-Rex Replicator. So this is a much more stable device, let's say. And it's cool because it's got tap tempo, and it's also got this chorus effect that you can add. So, a couple true tape analog delays at your disposal here. So welcome to the Rarefied Lounge. This is a great place to get out of the studio for a bit. Maybe you need a bite to eat. Maybe you need some coffee. We got a kitchenette here full with coffee machine, complimentary. Filtered water straight from the tap, microwave, toaster oven, mini fridge. Of course we have a couch, really cool circuit board table. And we've got a TV here and got some old school video games. We got Apple TV, including Netflix and HBO for your viewing pleasure. And basically everything you need, including a full bath. So actually, if you're from out of town, people have stayed here overnight, and it's just a small extra fee. So this is the mic closet in here, and you'll notice we actually have a house drum kit as well. It's a Premier with a slingo and snare and some Zildjian cymbals, and yeah, a bunch of microphones, which we're gonna show you some highlights of in a moment. All right, so we got a lot of mics at Rarefied. I just wanted to show you some highlights of the collection. Some of the better mics are the more obscure ones. Right here we've got our Neumann U67. So this is an amazing vocal mic, as well as for other things. It's an old tube mic, and can't beat it on many a source. This is another tube mic over here. This is kind of more obscure. This is a Lomo 19A18. It's a Russian tube mic. Very strange design, but very interesting sound. Over here we've got a vintage Akg D12E. So the more modern equivalent of this is the Akg D12, which we also have. But this is like the old school one. Great on kick drum. We got a pair of Bear Dynamic M160s here, little ribbon mics. These are great mics. This is a mic by a company called Sound Deluxe, which are now called Bach. But this is called the iFET7, and it's got two modes in it. The I mode, which stands for instrument, is similar to the Neumann FET47, and the V mode, which stands for vocal, is similar to the Neumann U87. So you kind of get a 2-in-1 on this. Great mic. Over here, we've got a pair of Telefunken Elem 260s. These are modern mics, not really made to sound like any particular vintage mic or anything like that, but they're just great small diaphragm tube mics. And these ones here are the Pluso P84s. And these are kind of made to sound similar to the Neumann KM84s, classic small diaphragm condenser. This big guy here is the AEA R44. I actually have two of these. So these are basically exact replicas of the old RCA 44 microphone. Big old ribbon mics. You probably see like Frank Sinatra singing into this. Amazing sound. This is a more obscure ribbon mic. It's an Rca Bk 5B. And these were designed to handle loud sound pressure level, and for a ribbon that's a little bit rare, especially for a vintage ribbon. This is an amazing mic on electric guitars. Really love it. This mic here is a modern mic from Josephson. It's called the E22S. It's a great mic for loud sources, snare drums, and other drums, and loud guitars too. Really just an overall great small diaphragm condenser, but not overly bright. Over here we've got a pair of Coles 4038s. These are also ribbon mics, classics for drum overheads, but anything that you want to have a nice dark beefy sound, these sound amazing on. And then finally we've got a couple of mics here from Placid Audio. These are really fun effect mics. This is called the Copperphone. That kind of has a built-in telephone kind of sound. This one here is called the Carbon Phone, and it has kind of a built-in grainy CB radio kind of sound. So little, fun toys to use here and there. Yeah, that's kind of the highlights of the mic collection. All right, guys. Well, that just about does it for this very extensive tour of Rarefied Recording. Thanks for watching. Thanks in advance for any comments. Please leave comments. Please leave questions. I would, of course, appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel. I hope to do more things in the future. I am planning on doing a detailed look at the Genesis, so look out for that. But other than that, if you have any need to get in touch, please don't hesitate to email info@rarefiedrecording.com, and hope to hear from you soon. Thanks.